Recording. All right, beauty. So with the front row, numbered left to right, 1, 2, 3. I know some of you have played front row, probably have a lot to say on this, but I just want to kind of go through a little bit our purpose. So like outline the position, the roles and expectation, discuss the key factors, and performance monitoring and goal setting. A couple of the things that came up the other day that I thought was interesting in the questions was, will feedback and goal setting go together, and will it influence playing time? Even if we're not necessarily getting the results, but players are playing well, will they get more playing time? And I feel very strongly about that. If individuals are performing well and playing well and learning and growing, I feel that they should be getting a run. But then my feeling is that some people always have more or less playing time than others. This is normal, but I think we want to support always the player that's growing and improving. So we're going to deal with that, and we're going to deal with the loose head first, then the hooker, and then the tight head. So number 1 is the loose head, number 2 is the hooker, and number 3 is the tight head. And as we go through the session, I will try to draw lines between them outside of their roles and how they link up with teammates. So, for example, like how do they link up with centers, halfbacks, and wings, for example. The easy ones are the locks and the back row, but sometimes it's not always observable what the other partnerships are. So, what I'd like you to do is, if you haven't done it, just take 5 minutes, click on the link that says Loose Head Prop Play. I apologize, I couldn't find highlight videos of women props, but I will keep trying to find videos that are of the women's game specifically. Okay, but so the videos that are embedded are of the men's game, but for the principles that we're covering tonight, they're sufficient. As I say, I will try to continue. Well, I will continue to search for women's rugby specific highlight examples. So let's take 5 minutes. Click on that link, and let's come back after you've watched the video. Go ahead and click on the link, watch the video. This is Loose Head Play. So I'm sending you some questions. They're in the chat box. Just curious, like what your thoughts are. So as a thought comes to your head, just go ahead and click on mute. We'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
What was the question? Oh, sorry.
So thank you.
He's pretty fast and mobile.
Can you say one more time?
He's pretty fast and mobile for a prop. No offense, Katie.
So the modern props and the modern way that we think about the front row as coaches is that these are swift, powerful, mobile, coordinated individuals. So the days of, perhaps expecting your props to show up and just push a bit in the scrum, lift a bit in the line out, and to be available for 1 in 4 rucks and maybe 1 in 6 or 7 carries. That may have been the way in the last decade or so, or maybe the last century even. It's a little bit different today. So one of the implications of that is with your physical training. Whilst mass is important, it's mass with mobility that matters. And so the ability to be coordinated and move laterally, accelerate a little bit, maybe not make the 60-yard sprint, but definitely make the 20-yard sprint. And to be able to repeat those bursts to break the line, create play. And what we're seeing from more props now, and what we expect to see, particularly in the women's game, are more props able to break the half tackle, offload, and then rejoin play a little bit. What other thoughts does anybody else have based on the video?
I mean, he was still very, even if he's super mobile, he was still very dominant in the scrum. Like he won like 4 or 5 scrums in the video.
Yeah, thank you very much. So like, Ariane, you play in the front row. For those folks that don't play in the front row, what do you think the differences are between a loose head and a tight head by position?
Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, that's okay. So here's one that everybody should like think about. The loose head has the left side of their face open and their left shoulder open. And the tight head has both shoulders engaged. So the tight head has very little room to work. So we're going to deal with that last because it's kind of last but not least, because we think about the tight head in our team as literally being the anchor for the team. The loose head is far more different. So mentally, they're attacking their tight head differently. And the primary goal is to get underneath and drive the tight head upwards and backwards, not so just that they destroy the scrum, but they get their hooker off balance. And once the hooker's feet and the tight head's feet are off the ground, it allows our locks to drive with the back row through the scrum. And so the goal of the loose head is to be absolutely destructive, a destroyer of that space, that contest for space. So we'll see that a little bit. Okay, so let's crack on here. All right, so just a summary. The loose head, sure scrum stability. When you look at that video again, you want to look at the footwork of the loose head, particularly where their left and right feet are, and the alignment of their feet to the feet of the hooker and the tight head. And then the relationship between the loose head and the number 4, which plays behind them, and the number 6 or 7, depending on who's lining up, on their back hip, potentially. And so the loose head has a lot of relationships that they have to be very good at developing in the scrum first. So that is the relationship with the hooker, the relationship with the hooker and the lock, and the relationship with the hooker, the lock, and the back row player on their side. So first you have the setup with the hooker, then the engagement setup with the locks, joined by the back row, and the loose head times their work off the hooker. Their primary responsibility in the scrum is to attack the loose head, driving, elevating, and trying to get the tight head off balance. Because if the tight head's off balance, the scrum shifts. And typically, what you see is when a loose head is dominant, the scrum, because she's pushing here, the scrum wheels the tail of the opponent towards the side where the ball came in. And so what that means is we're wheeling the scrum, and it gives our back row the opportunity to open up and actually attack their back line with our defensive runs faster. So the quality of the engagement of the loose head determines largely what our back row can and can't do. If she wins the contest with the tight head, there's a chance our open side can get on top and get out, and our number 8 can come out and the 6 can come behind. So when we're looking at the scrum, we're looking particularly at the way the loose head plays. We're looking what's the degree to which the relationships of the players that they're playing with allow the scrum to function as it should, the dominance of the loose head on the tight head, and then how can the back row on our team be activated. That's a big job. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the untrained eye and the trained eye all the way through this. So I'll come back to that in a second. The 1 and 3, so 1 is the loose head, 3 is the tight head in our team. They sure line out possession, and they're big time players in scrums and lineouts. So rucks and mauls, you're expecting the loose head to be a ruck destroyer and a ruck creator, as the number 3 is as well with the mauls and the rucks. So they're clearing rucks and they're hitting rucks. Mauls, they're joining and driving, or they're defending and stalling. They play decisively as pillar and post. In our team, we want to see our props on the pillar or the post. We don't want to see them in the backs. If we get caught in a turnover with a turnover situation with our props on the flanks, I would think generously that the opponent's wing and fullback should be our prop. And if they don't, credit to our prop, they've gone above and beyond in their defense, because their positional sense should be tight. So if you remember Tuesday's chat, we were looking at the defensive line. Our props are coming back on one side only to establish, and that's just to cut the running down. But we've got our 4 and 5 to the middle. And so 1 and 3, 4 and 5 have similar roles and responsibilities, but we only want to focus wherever we can on pillar and post work. I mentioned the destruction at the ruck and the maul, and very strong in go forward play. So one of the great things that we have with our team right now is that we have a front row. We have props in like Ariane, BZ, Bridget, Amy, that we know can go forward, create yardage. They don't have to create big yardage, but we know that they can create enough yardage to get us going forward, and that's what we want. So breaking down the position. So Ariane mentioned there about the loose head winning those scrums. So you've got mentally, the loose head has to enjoy the contest. They need fierce emotional commitment, because unlike fullbacks who face their opponent from maybe 40 or 50 yards away sometimes, the loose head is cheek to cheek with her opponent, and this has to be something that you've got to want. The contest has to be something you desire. Disciplined physical contestant. So what does that mean? It means that when you're driving, you're trying to preserve the drive and not create penalty or free kick. And this is why you've got to know the laws of the game, because you and your hooker and your tight head have to understand the sequence of engagement and how to get on top of your opponent. And so because you're first in when the ball is presented, you lead and communicate at the scrum. So I just want to pause there, come out of that for a second. What questions does anybody have on that right now? Is this new information? Yes?
I know for me it is mostly new.
Not particularly.
Okay.
Some yes, some.
Okay. So let's crack on. So let's look here at the decision making. So a lot of second phase decision making because the front row comes out last. So you've got to make the decision to join the play. So that means join the ruck, join the maul, join the defensive line. Do you go for a pass? Do you take a run on the second phase? Do you support a runner on the second phase? And what's your positional requirements in the second phase? So one of the things that came up on Tuesday, I think, was about positions and where to be. A lot. This is like player education piece here. Once we get out in the field, you need to be asking myself and your coaches and your veterans around you where you need to be. But primarily, if you're stuck on this JRSP, join, run, support, or position, and knowing where to go, you need to take a look at it. In the piece we're going to do in the second half, when England beat the All Blacks in the World Cup, when England beat Wales, one of the reasons they're able to do that isn't because they're playing improvised rugby, and you'll see that. And one of the reasons that we're going to be playing patterns is that you'll have tools that you've already practiced that will become automated so that our forwards and our backs together in harmony know exactly where they're going and what to do and how to get out of jail in certain oppositions versus a system that means everybody's got to be switched on and thinking at the same time. And so some of you might like being switched on and thinking at the same time. I love that once we've broken the line and we've improvised. In order to break the line, I prefer a little bit more structure and purpose to play. So we're closer to England than we are to New Zealand in this way, which isn't bad as England are so dominant. So we want to recognise the role of the ruck, and I should say that also includes England women being as dominant as they are as well. So kind of look to the leaders, if you will, in the game to learn a bit from them. So the props always recognise the role at the ruck. That is, do they enter? Do they contest? Do they preserve the ruck? Do they protect it? And so those principles come down to decision making. So it's knowing what to do, when to do, why to do, how to do. So there's a lot of thinking that we have to do in training in order to make the decision making for the props easy, automated, and efficient so that they can get the most out of their game. And then we're thinking about the positional requirements, like physically, this speaks for itself, hopefully. Technically, because of everybody in the scrum, the loose head has the most space to work with their shoulders and with their head and with their body shape. They need to be very creative in the one-on-one contest with the tight head. Of course, agility before contact, low body before contact, evasive running with the ball because you're going to receive it in tight spaces. So a sidestep to get beyond the contact is what we're looking for. Accurate short passing and destructive tackling like a back row number 6. So let me just come out of there a second. Questions, comments, thoughts?
It seems like defensively, the props should be leading the close quarter defense, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
right?
So that's absolutely spot on, Olga. So if you think about the 4 props that I just named there, our 4 players, you would expect them to be able to handle any of the forwards on our opponent's side in the close quarters. So typically with props, you're looking for chop tackles because you're close to contact. You don't typically want to keep taking the tackle high. So it's like chop tackles below the waist and then getting back to your feet to contest the space, close the space is what we're looking for. Other thoughts, questions? All right. So let's have a look at the hooker. Actually, you know what? Let me scroll down here. Yeah, so I talked about this just briefly, like measuring performance. Okay. Can everybody see that slide?
No, I do not see a slide.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah, you haven't been sharing anything that we can. There.
Why don't you speak up? Like, throw me a banana.
He was like,
Not quite sure if you were supposed to do something.
What am I, like talking to like blank faces and empty microphones?
Yeah, I found my phone.
Yeah, we had the PowerPoint open on our phone. I just didn't know which one that was.
I'm feeling like Charlie Brown kicking the football right now.
I have no idea what that means.
I have no idea what that means. Jolly good. Okay. All right, I'm going to keep it in this for a second. All right, so I talked earlier about obvious to trained eyes, obvious to untrained eyes. Okay, so here's what's obvious to untrained eyes. And frankly, these aren't people I listen to very much, okay? Because like basically anybody who is watching a game can point this out. So uninformed critics aren't important to me, okay? So if the throw doesn't work, it doesn't work. Everybody can see that. Can they problem solve it? That's different. Can they see that the scrum's been won or lost? Whoop-de-doo. Okay, you can point it out. Big deal. Can you solve the problem with the players? Strong go forward in tight places. Wow, really? And so on. Okay, so let's just be clear. Like, if anybody can see it, yes, okay, it's a give me. It points to an outcome. But what I'm really interested in is the problem solving, and I'm really interested in the things that are obvious to trained eyes, like people who know what they're looking at and the teammates around you who know what's going on. So contemporaneous notes, so you know when I'm with you, when we're working together on the sideline during the game, I'm typically taking notes. I don't count knock-ons because I can see them. Right? A knock-on is like what it is. What I'm interested in is the root cause and what I can do about it in training, or what we can do during a game to improve our efficiency and improve our success and productivity. And I hope that's what you do as well. Positional integrity. If a player is in the right place at the right time, to the untrained eye, they think that, that's it. They just made that tackle, they're there. But what they won't know is a loose head prop, hooker, or a tight head. If they don't understand the game, they don't understand the work rate of a front row player to actually get out of the scrum last, get into position, turn the ball over, stop the ball, get up, realign, run supporting lines. They're just watching a different game. They're analyzing a different game. So position integrity, right place at the right time. When we're watching props, we're looking for work rate. The work rate comes from fitness and conditioning. and also the desire to be engaged in the game. Okay, tackles that cause turnovers and disrupt attacks. So a tackle that stops an attack, if it leads to a turnover, I think of the turnover as being linked to the prop's performance or to the tackler's performance, because one without the other doesn't work. The person who's jackling needs somebody to make the tackle. So I see that as a shared contribution to the team. Okay, and so for our props, effective ruck engagement is like a lazy prop will flop on it or will contest the ruck that's already lost. That's not good for the team. And doing something late means that you didn't have positional integrity in the first place. So one precedes the other, no, one follows the other. So when we're working together with loose heads and tight heads and hookers, as we are with all players, there's the things that everybody can see, and then there's the things that people who know rugby and know the game can see. And so what we want to be is definitely the first one, like obviously seeing the obvious, because we want to deal with the obvious first, but then it's the unseen things to the untrained eye that they might not see that we want to contend with. Okay, an easy one, like going from front to back. Those of you that have played at fullback, you know if you played a 14 and 1, so that means 14 defenders in front of you, one of you behind. One of the ways to create problems for the fullback is to chip the ball behind the front line where there's no sweeper, and then the 15 has to come forward, therefore leaving space all around them and not having any coverage. Well, most people would watch the kick. People that know the game would watch the space and to see how that can be exploited. So just be mindful, as we're always talking about this, when you're measuring your performance, there's the things that you can see obviously, and then there's the things that are in the game that a lot of people don't see because they're not looking at it or looking for it or don't know what to look for. But that's not us. We can look everywhere. So we're back to the hooker. So let's take 5. Let's watch this number 2 video and see what you think. I'm going to turn my camera off. I'm going to leave the slides on and going to come back in 5 minutes. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Savannah, I like your kitty.
Olga, she likes you too.
Okay, I'm just curious, as you're watching that, what thoughts do you have?
It's all over the place. Yeah.
So some of you,
Ends up in the support position.
might you say again, please?
Oh, yeah, I was saying that he ends up in a support role a lot, especially since they're focusing on him following after the line. You see that he's either at the tail of the maul or following that 9 onto the next set. And then either getting the ball usually very close to the line or supporting that other ball carrier. That's it.
Yeah. So we have several players capable of playing hooker, and as we go through the requirements for the position, we're thinking about our hookers being as mobile and creative in different ways maybe than some people might think they would be. And so this video sort of demonstrates what we're going for in terms of a modern style of play. And you can see that, like you mentioned there, the hooker is very mobile, looking to attack, is a creative player, but also a brute of a player as well. And they've got to show lots of different kinds of leadership on the field. And so we have 2 or 3 players for sure in our personnel that can make these contributions. So let's crack on here a little bit. So in terms of condition, the hooker sets the tone for the team. So the physical tone is akin to a number 7. So a 7 usually is one of the top 3 players, if not the top player in terms of condition on the team. You typically find 6, 7, and 8 will push everybody else to be stronger, faster, more mobile, more coordinated, and that's a pretty good thing. And it's also normal in rugby. For the hooker, the enormous work output that is required to play well is extreme. So you need an extreme personality. It shouldn't come as a surprise that people that play number 2 aren't very liked by their oppositions. And that's because they have to be confrontational, decisive. They have to impose their personality and their physicality and their technical capability on the team. If your hooker is playing well and your loose head is playing well and your tight head plays well, the chances are very good that the team comes out on the right side of a victory. The hooker leads with a superior work ethic. The pushing power is extremely important. And so you may have seen the other videos that we made on Sunday there with Nicole and Katie, but in our front row, in fact, our whole pack, our pushing power is something that we'll be developing, but the hooker particularly sets the tone physically for the tempo at the scrum, the line out, and around the field. And so if you find that a hooker is outplaying a back row player, then maybe the back row player needs to up their game a little bit to match the physicality and the work output of the hooker. Technically, you just need to be reliable. So we don't need the best scrummager. We just need a reliable scrummager that wins our ball. We need an accurate, reliable throw is what we need. Evasive, accurate passing, destructive tackling, ABCs, LBCs as the loose head. Now, the summary, I've got this back to front here a little bit. Summary. So when you think of the spine, so I'm going to go all the way back to the front here. When you see that picture of the blue and you look at the spine, you see 2, 8, and 9. So 8 is the connection with the halfbacks, 9 is the connection with the backs. 10 is the magician, in our case, or orchestrator for the backs. And 15, I like to think of them as the quiet assassin. So the hooker leads from the front with the spine. And those players, in terms of decision making on the field, those players 2, 8, 9, 10, and 15, they should be the leaders and communicators on the field more often. And it doesn't mean they're captains. It just means that they're in harmony with each other, checking in with each other, talking to each other. Everybody knows what's going on because the 5 of them can communicate to everybody else quickly, efficiently, and productively. So close contact, you expect the hooker to be as strong as a prop and as quick as a center. Essentially a 4th back row player. They'll always be last out of the scrum because the scrum has to disassemble. And that's why they run support lines, because they're coming from late, often covered support lines. So the defense isn't always aware of where the hook is coming from. They're a possession winner at the line out and scrum. So possession winner means the hooker throws the ball in accurately enough that we can receive it, wins the strike on our own ball. They're a line breaker, disruptive tackler, and they play with guile. And just curious, does everybody know what guile means? Anyone?
Like cunning, right?
Cunning. Absolutely. You're cunning. And so hookers are decisive and they're cunning. Tricky players to play against and quite unlikable. That's a good thing.
Are they cheeky?
They are very cheeky. And
That's what I thought.
hopefully we've got 2 or 3 cheeky players. And so I mentioned, that like the psychological aspect to this. Like for our props and their teammates, let's take the teammates playing with their props. You shouldn't be surprised that props are edgy, punchy, aggressive, won't take any shit from anybody, and they have A-type personalities. And they don't like being let down because they're confrontational, and that because they have to lead from the front. So if you find on the field, or in training, sometimes they can be a bit like edgy, it's normal and it shouldn't be surprising because of the types of job that they have to do for the team. Okay. On the other side, you often find once they cross the line, they're delightful people, and maybe you'd want to have a party with them. I'll say it this way. So the hooker, it's got to have extremely high emotional intensity and commitment because of the level of responsibility they have and the intensity of the confrontation they're always going to have with the other team. So the loose head has a get out of jail because they've got the left side open. The tight head is contesting that loose head and the other hooker. They have a different kind of relationship. But our hooker has the maximum amount of responsibility in the entire scrum. They set the scrum, they set the tone, and the scrum responds to the hooker. So the way our hooker goes is often the way our pack will go. They need to enjoy winning possession, lead and communicate, we've talked about. Got to know the laws of the game. So that means getting to the mark, setting it as they want to set it, and being aware of where they're out in the field. So for example, if you're not familiar with this, if we're under pressure in the scrum and the scrum goes down on our own ball, often a penalty will be given against because we've collapsed it. And so if you're playing the backs and you've wondered why penalties are given because of scrums going down, often it's because one or more of the front row and the locks wasn't able to contend with the pressure that was brought on them. So it's helpful to know the rules and why penalties and so on might be given. Then in terms of decision making, It's huge. I didn't mention the decision making at the line out because that's also a given. The hooker and the line out unit will have already decided the line out before they've got there, and the tempo will be on the hooker and to make that happen. Just like with the loose head, they've got these opportunities to join, run, support, position themselves, and work through those things and so on. I want to just pop on here a little bit to measuring performance. So there's the things that the untrained eye see, that's the obvious stuff, but then there's the other things. And so you see here jackal play. And so for a hooker, they might not get to the second phase, but they're going to get to the third phase. So can they be a turnover specialist for us? And so for us, we have specific positions that focus on turnovers, right? 12, 6, 7, 8, and 2. Jackal play will be apparent because we'll have noticed that the hooker has read the line of support and has made a correct decision at the time to attack that ball. The work off the ball for the hooker puts them in a position to break the line, support the play, or enter. And then double tackles. You'll often find, because hookers are joining play late, they'll often have just a moment more time to decide if they're going to make a double tackle or not. And you typically find them outside the props, sometimes outside the second rows. So, just before we get to the tight head, what questions or comments do you have about the hooker's position?
It seemed like in the video, the hooker, when they were on the double tackle, were often they were targeting the ball.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought that up. So when you're watching top play like that, what you notice is that players that are coming just slightly later have the opportunity to attack the ball. If you've ever had an opportunity to watch a video of Richie McCall, the former New Zealand captain, World Rugby Player of the Year, number 7, you would often see him tackling ball side. And one of the reasons that you tackle ball side is that the stiff arm doesn't apply in the same way, and you've got more of an opportunity to delay play if you tackle ball side. On Tuesday, it came up about attacking outside in and inside out, and that's cool. And I used to support those ideas. But as the game's developed a little bit differently, one of the things I've noticed, along with other coaches, is that if you tackle on the ball side, irrespective of where you're coming from, if you tackle on the ball side, it's very difficult for the player to release the ball. And what you find with hookers in particular, because they're often joining from the inside. So that being, if the player's been on the left, they're coming from the left, typically inside the ball. If the ball comes back into a channel, the initial contact is made like you saw, and then they're the second player on. And it gives them an opportunity to disrupt and destroy the attack. So good catch. Thank you. Other comments? All right. So let's go on to our loose head. Sorry, our tight head. And let's take 5 minutes. This will be slightly different because the tight head is a different position completely than anything maybe in the world of sport. So let's take 5 minutes, watch this video, and then we'll come back and break it down a bit. All right, team. Thoughts, comments?
So many major collisions. Like major.
So what do you all see as the main differences in tight head and loose head play right now? Just based on the videos that you've watched.
They do a lot more ball carrying, like the hard yards.
So one of the reasons, well, maybe let me ask you, when we were doing the sevens, did anybody ever wonder why I put so much emphasis on the forwards carrying the ball?
Because they're not fun to bring down.
That's what we were talking about in the video, is that if you have a tight head that is confident in their run, they're impossible to take down. So it's just, they're throwing all the bodies at them and they're just trucking them as long as they're in a good solid body position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that we have at least 4 players, maybe 5, that have this capability for us in the WPL Division 1 season for sure. And I think one of the real bright spots of what I've seen in our strengths is that we seem comfortable having the confrontation. And I've seen a lot of props in the women's game shy away from that confrontation. And I think that's a real strength of ours, that we have the physical capability and the emotional commitment for the challenge. I think that's great. Okay, so I'm going to take you straight to number 2, because essentially the role and responsibility of the tight head in all other aspects of the game, apart from the scrum, is the same as the loose head. So I asked Ariane at the top of this, what's the difference? And the tight head is absolutely rock solid. They're the anchor deliberately. So the stronger the body position and the ability of our tight head to take the pressure and to make sure that their loose head gets no leverage, makes no ground, makes no gain on them, advantages us. Because as the hooker, well, so when you think about the scrum, so I'm going to take us all the way back to the beginning here. When you look at that picture of the scrum, I'm just putting them sit. When you look at 1, 2, 4, 7, that side of the scrum, the left-hand side of the scrum, is the ball-winning unit. 3, 5, and 6 are the stabilizing side. So here, where you see number 1 on the red is trying to maximize the pressure on 3 so that 4, 8, and 7 are turned to their right, which allows their number 9 the opportunity to attack as a frontline defender, and means that our hooker is off balance in the hook, and our 4 and 5 typically struggle with their footwork as the pressure comes on. So 3, who puts their heads between red 1 and 2, if their side of the scrum, if the right side of the scrum with 3, 5, and 6 is square and stable and strong enough, having the correct tension and connection across with 3, 2, and 1, stabilized by 7 and 4 and 8. 3 makes sure that we keep winning our ball and puts us in a position always to play off the front foot if we can maintain that contest. So for us, given that there are more scrums typically in a game than a line out. We want our tight heads, because in the front row, we're typically always going to play a game with at least 5 or 6 front row players. Because if everybody's playing at the top of their ability, there's always going to be replacements. And at the pace that we want to play, and with the ferocity and the intensity, everybody should expect to blow their ballast after 60 minutes, and we'll bring on the blitz bombs to replace them. So the number 3 anchors the scrum. That's the greatest asset that they are to us. And what they do for the team is basically create a fulcrum around which we can play. So here, strength-wise, you don't have to be short and squat to be a tight head. The length of your back used to be an issue. It's not much of an issue today because of the scrum engagement and the laws that have changed around that. So props are changing in strength and size because the rules of engagement at the front row have changed quite a bit. So the most important thing is to be strong and be able to maintain a driving position. If you watch the scrum carefully, you'd notice that the ankles, knees and hips will basically at 90 degrees or there too for a driving position, just as you'd be like pushing a prowler or like driving a sled with your shoulders. So this is the position that the tight head is in, supported by the 5 and 6. So mentally, they have a fierce emotional commitment to the contact, extremely disciplined because of the front 3. They're the player that's going to be under the most pressure. So they have to be able to sustain emotional intensity from the loose head and be able to be comfortable being attacked and be comfortable defending and attacking themselves when we have enough stability in the scrum to go forward. If the tight head goes forward and the tight head gets on top of their loose head, the scrum is ours, no question about it, as it would be for our opponent. If our opponent gets on top of our tight head, we're going to have problems. So when we're thinking about the front row, we're thinking about all of the opportunities that the front row creates for us. The front row creates possession, they create go forward, they create a sense of contest and commitment to open play, breakdowns, and they basically put us on the front foot in all aspects of the game. How they link up, that's a different aspect for a different chat, if you will. So measuring performance, again, the things that you look for from your tight head is work off the ball. You saw the collisions; they're big time. The players that are in this position, these are tough people mentally. They can handle themselves in terms of calming down, regulating their emotional intensity, because they know that they're always going to be in a battle. And so if there's one thing that's consistent about the mentality of the loose head, the hooker, and the tight head, is that they know that they're always going to be in the contest. So if they're always on the front foot and always willing for the contest, our whole team will go well. So this is why we want to support our front row so well, and we want to make sure that all of us, once they create the platform, we take advantage of what they give us. And then equally in the loose play and the open play, when we get to our backs and our half backs and so forth, back row, they've got contributions that they'll make that the front row need them to make in order to do their job. All right, so before we take this break for 10, what questions or thoughts do you have about what I've just covered there for the front row?
I just laughed that you said that loose heads are confrontational, and I'm the least confrontational person on the field.
So Why do you think I said a
Is that sarcasm, Bridget?
Huh?
Why?
Is that sarcasm, Bridget?
No, we were just laughing because I prefer loose head. I don't know why. I just prefer it to tight head. But you had some of the things like they tend to be edgy and confrontational people, and we laugh because I avoid confrontation.
I am very confrontational, though.
Play a loose head box if you want.
Throw her in.
You know, after this quarantine, I could maybe be a prop.
She eats our whole cookie stash.
So it's interesting.
Well, we were just talking about how props could be people of any body type, so you could still be a prop
Thanks,
pre
Megan.
quarantine. Welcome, friends.
What was something that I mentioned or covered here that was new information for you?
I guess a lot of it is some of the subtle differences between loose head and tight head. I think most of us just assume like, okay, it's just one or the other. It's the same thing. It's probably what side do you like or what shoulder is better for you. And I just think some of the subtle differences are things that we maybe don't necessarily look at. We have a tendency, and a lot of people, the more experienced person or people who someone who's prop more, you always tend to stick the newer people in at loose head, and the more experienced people in at tight head, simply because, I mean, for safety purposes, I think, but knowing the subtle differences and kind of why we would put one in one position versus the other, based on their various capabilities is, I think, something maybe we've not looked at before.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, one of the things that you could decide in the game. So let's say, for example, we're in a really good contest and our tight head thinks that they could do better at loose head, and the loose head's like, yeah, okay, I think I might be able to handle your tight head side. There's no problem with changing in the game, providing both players know what they're getting into. And I think sometimes in the environment we play in, that's sometimes normal, where players will swap sides during the game. I think what we'd like to get to, by the time the WPL and Division 1 season starts, what we'd like to get to is a front row that understands what each person's strengths are against different opposition. And whilst for sure, I think 100% we want to go with our strengths and our preferences, sometimes props find that they do better against certain opponents than others. And, you know, I'm definitely open-minded on that. Obviously, providing, you know, that the scrum is stable and safe, and that the hooker knows exactly what's going on, because if props change, it's not only the props that are changing, it's the whole scrum as well. Particularly the hooker. So when we're thinking about anything to do with the props, we always have to think about the hooker first, because they set the tone, and then we have to make sure that our locks understand their role and responsibilities with respect to how they play with different props for different reasons. It's not always the same way. Anybody else?
I think having those like roles defined, going back to yesterday's goal setting, can kind of help align with what it is that you're trying to achieve in your position. And so maybe when we do go up against those opponents, you can evaluate if you are being successful in the things that you're meant to be successful in.
Yeah, thank you, Olga. Also makes it easier for me coaching once I know what each player is going for. You know, one of the difficulties that I have is when somebody asks me, you know, how do you think I did today? I was like, I don't know. How do you think you did today?
Yeah.
You know, the more specificity that I'm approached with, the better I can be in providing useful feedback in a timely way that works for the player. So I'm going to go back to the presentation here for a second. Okay, so on this bit, we're going to take 10. You don't have to do it all, okay? So this is like some 242 stuff. So I'm not sure how much you know, or I thought it would be good based off Esther's question the other day, just to take you on a step, okay, and give you some background into what it is, the 242, if you're unfamiliar with it. So there's some reading here if you want to do it, not today, right now, but what I would like you to do is look at the 242 intro, just for now. It's about 9 minutes long. And then what we'll do is that we'll have a look at, we'll talk about the 242 and what it means and how we might be able to do it or not do it, and how we might integrate it or not integrate it. And then thinking about the United strengths. And I mentioned earlier, and hopefully you've got a little bit of a flavor, that I particularly like England because of Eddie Jones. And so just curious, how many of you have heard of Eddie Jones?
I did. I don't like him because he beat France.
Cool, thank you. So if you're not familiar with Eddie Jones, one of the reasons I really like the way he coaches is that he started off as a school teacher coaching teenagers in Randwick, which is a suburb of Sydney, Australia. And he's Japanese Australian. And he had a hard upbringing and made his way in the game. Never played for Australia. Played a lot of second grade rugby, as they call it there. And then basically went on a coaching odyssey. But in 2003, he coached Australia to the World Cup final and lost. In 2007, he was the assistant coach for the South African team that won the World Cup. And then in 2011, I think he took a break. 2015, he was with Japan. And at that time in 2015, Japan caused the most sensational upset in the history of World Cup rugby under his coaching to beat South Africa. And then you may or may not know, but with his coaching, he picked up the England team after a disastrous 2015 campaign to help them towards back-to-back Grand Slams, leading to them beating New Zealand in the World Cup semi-final last year, and then facing defeat again against South Africa in the final. But one of the things that I really like about Eddie Jones is that he has principles that are based on maximizing the opportunities that every player has. And because he's worked with South Africa, Australia, Japan, he had 2 years with Saracens in the Premier League as well, and England, he's not slavish to a system or to a way of playing. He's very much about players, and his trajectory in his coaching journey is one that I really admire a lot, as I do Warren Gatland's, who coached the Welsh and British Lions team. So I borrow heavily right now from his attitude and his orientation to players and getting the most out of players. And New Zealand played the 2-4-2 against England in the World Cup, and England exploited it in very specific ways, which you'll see tonight. So what I'd like to do, it's 12 minutes past 8. Let's take 10. In fact, let's come back at 25 past 8, and you'll have watched the 2-4-2 intro. We'll do a quick chat about that. Then we'll watch England knock off New Zealand, have a chat, and then wrap things up. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you, Rachel.
Ray, I wanted to be like Brutus and be held.
Are we offline? Because the internet connection seems to be offline.
No, we're good.
That's what I kept saying.
I don't know. Okay, folks, and we're back.
I always like that Brutus looks surprised at everything that's happening.
Listen, you guys aren't special. I can do that with my cat too. For it. No, I can't. That's mine's 60 pounds. 65 pounds. He's chunky.
Yours?
The coronavirus is added to our dog's weight as well.
It's a she. No. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Just curious, what did you notice about the 242?
I did set up some stuff, but as a 1 and a 3, I feel like I wouldn't always be able to be there. You know?
So, what do you think it's?
Just say from a forward standpoint, we did this a couple.
Say again.
Sorry, DCL. I'm saying we did the 242 a couple of years ago, and it was exhausting. Okay, 4 years ago apparently.
Described as that.
And yeah, for the tight forwards, you were just constantly working in the middle. And it was fine if your buddies gave you a chance to get a break, but we just were working a lot.
We're just staying on the
But we
fringe.
also did not have great habits of.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, to say that we also did not. We would overcommit more so than in that video they're talking about that fourth person running off.
Yeah.
We would just all pile in or just not be there. Like,
And I was trying to add that some people would take advantage of being on the 2 part and stay out there. And like Katie and I would be up the middle, like constantly. And then I'm like, and can anyone else come help? You know, like Katie's doing everything.
Yeah. So please carry on.
I also think that one of the things too is that typically I think that the pattern calls for someone else to be that first receiver sometimes, and the way it was coached was that the 10 was always the first receiver, so the 10 had to do a lot of work, which it's the work they typically do anyway, but it just seemed like it was like pretty static because it had to go to the 10 every time.
Yeah. So for some kinds of play, it can be very beneficial. So for example, if you know that you're fitter than the other team, then typically you can sense that within maybe 10, 15 minutes of play. You get places first, you're just ahead of them. Maybe you can go to this system, but I noticed that in the WPL, our neighbors, for example, the defenses are not going to like tolerate that so well. And if we overwork our players, then my concern is that folks would be more interested in trying to satisfy the system than necessarily playing the game against some of the best players on the planet. So I think there were like lots of benefits to the 242. It was major in New Zealand because of the width that it gives, but also the fitness levels of the individuals that are playing the 242 at the top level or on the extreme end. So the beat test, for example, a lot of players will be above 16, pushing level 17, playing the 242. And so in order to play it quickly and to play it well for a women's game, we would be looking at most of our forwards pushing up, level 11, 11.5 on the bleed test to play against the opposition that we will in the fall. Against opposition that is mediocre, maybe get away with it a little bit, but against fit, strong, organized, and well-coached teams that are highly motivated to contest, it could be a hard ask for us. I know Chicago had success with it last year, and there's good reasons for that success, and congratulations for last year. Just different for this group that we're going forward with. So the United Strengths kind of touched on. What I'd like you to do is look at how England took care of New Zealand. And if you didn't see the World Cup semi-final, particularly in the backs, when you see the mistakes that New Zealand made in playing rugby, they made some real schoolgirl errors. And I'll leave it to you to figure out why they made those errors from the analysis. So this video is about, I want to say it's about 11 minutes long. So this will be our wrap up after you've seen it. We're looking to play more akin to the English patterns, which is player centered, not system centered. And hopefully this will give you like a grounding, maybe in why that is a little bit. So have a look at this England versus New Zealand one. You'll see that when England play Ireland and England play Wales, they do different things. The thing I'll say about the Welsh game that was different in New Zealand, where Wales beat England 2 out of the last 3 times, with the exception of South Africa, Wales and South Africa were the only 2 teams to play England and contest them at the breakdown at the right time. And when they contested England at the breakdown at the right time, they were able to stifle England's forward play and go forward and decision making behind the ruck enough that they could retain possession themselves and get back into the game. So the breakdown was a key feature of beating England and stopping them from doing the things that they did that ultimately beat Wales 3 weeks ago and beat New Zealand in the World Cup semi-final and reduced them a little bit there. So I got like 8:32. Let's come back in 11 minutes. So that'll be like 8:43 after you've watched this analysis, and then we'll have a chat and wrap up. So go ahead and click on that England versus New Zealand and watch the analysis by Squid Rugby. Hi, team. So just curious, so what do you think about the way England went about New Zealand?
I mean, they pretty much like just starved them of space. Like anytime they tried to go wide, they were just there
So,
fighting to watch.
so you mean that they were organized in defense?
Yeah.
What did you notice about them? Go ahead, please.
I think it also touches on the concept that like if you're playing a system, then people know your system and you're vulnerable because you're playing predictable patterns versus like playing a pattern where you can adjust to whatever's happening on the field in the moment.
Yeah, thank you for that. One thing I wanted to bring up that isn't shown in this video is that the pillar and post defense that New Zealand played last year before the World Cup in the series that they play, the Sanzar series against Argentina, South Africa, and Australia, was that they had a gap between the pillar and the post that was about 6 to 7 yards wide. And there was a couple of games when they got picked off in the center because they were basically increasing the space, trusting that their opponent wouldn't come back to the ruck. And if you remember last year, one of the tactics that we used in sevens that I hoped might be picked up in 15s was that when teams trust you not to go down the middle, they attack third and fourth defender out, sometimes fifth defender out. And when you snipe in against the pillar and post and keep them honest, sometimes you get the breakthrough that you want with an offload or a quick set behind that phaser play to continue. But what it does is shrink the defense on one side, sometimes both sides of the ruck, so you can play with more width. And so that was the thinking behind that tactic last year. It's also a rugby league tactic. And one of the things about Eddie Jones that not a lot of people know is that he grew up playing rugby league, which was, when he was growing up, was the #1 sport in Australia. And if you know your history a little bit, rugby history, you might have heard of the Ella brothers from Australia. Also, the Ella brothers were kind of like the Harlem Globetrotters of rugby in their day. And Eddie Jones grew up with them, he went to school with them, played with them, and the Ella brothers changed how forwards and backs handled the ball for many years. And so why is that important? It's important because when you think about what Eddie Jones decided to do against New Zealand, he decided to replicate rugby league play in key areas of the field with the England team, but also, just like you said there, Esther, decided to make the 2-4-2 system weak according to England's strengths. What were some other things that people noticed?
Having watched the game, one of the things that's always impressive about watching England play is that, like, good game or bad game, their line speed defensively, like, never changes. It's one of the most consistent things about their defense is, like, how quickly players get up and get back in and then get off the line.
Yeah, so they're world class at moving their bodies at high speed. And being able to control our bodies at speed is something that we can all learn to do, luckily for us. And getting off the line is something that we can do something about, which is good for us. And certainly a strength of ours is our contact and our one-on-one tackling. That's something we can do well too.
And I think another really good call out from the video is that one thing that England do secure in scoring early, aside from going up, is like winning the mental battle, because teams start to panic, like the game just started and we're already losing, right? So it's pretty easy to go into like a panic or a scramble mode from the get-go, which is what England want you to do.
Yeah, and actually, I want to commend everybody that played sevens last summer, because we didn't talk about it explicitly. It was more how we went about doing things. But the dedication and discipline everybody had to scoring first and scoring frequently, part of that is to create a psychological momentum that the other team has to overcome, particularly if the other team fancies themselves as favourites, let's say. And so putting the opposition under pressure with early points is definitely a strategy that we really want to capitalize on as much as we can, emotionally and so on. Other thoughts, questions, comments?
One of the big takeaways that I had for it was just based on like how you were talking with just going over front row positions, knowing what your job is, and how they just hit on the fact that they knew exactly what their plan was for the beginning of each game, and that people, you could see the players going exactly where they knew they were going to go based on the reaction. And so if that's something that we have a plan and everybody knows the role they're playing and we all recognize those roles, then it'll help us act as quickly as they were able to. So they said they didn't have to think about it because they just all knew.
Yeah, so there's this like maybe this is the point you're making, is the automaticity of playing. The other thing that I really like about being part of this club is that everybody's a fast learner, and I really love that. And I love it when we're figuring out solutions, how quickly everybody can adapt and try to find a solution that works. And I think this is also part of being a quality player, is that you find solutions quickly and adapt. And once you've adapted, you automate your learning and you become in flow with the game. The planning part is really important. So you know that we want to increase our training to 3 nights a week. And so part of that is to make sure that by the time we have our first game, whether it's sevens or 15s, is that we know what our roles are, we know what our game plan is, and within that game, we can play different patterns. I think in the analysis, the analyst discussed Eddie Jones had been planning some of these things for several years. And so sometimes you just keep things in your pocket, that you, as a coach and as a team, that you bring out certain other occasions. And so we do have some wonderfully skilled players in our team. So, for example, with Emily joining us at fullback, it gives us an opportunity actually to show some things in some ways and show some other things in different ways, at the same time disguising what our intention is, but knowing all the time what it is we're trying to do. And this will be the same with some of the line out and maul plays that we're going to construct for the forwards, is that we have to make sure that there's a plan, and that's the job of myself and the coaches, to make sure that the plan is clear, that all of our key players understand the plan, and that the whole team is on side and clear about what our objectives are, so that everybody knows what their job is and what we're going for. And then as things unfold in the game, we'll problem solve using our quality for solution findings this way. What did you notice in the difference between the 2-4-2 and the way that England went about their game?
The 2-4-2 is successful when you can dictate the pace of the game.
Yeah, so it's also like with the 1-3-1, 1-3-3-1, and some of you might be familiar with like this alternative version, which is becoming popular now, 1-3-2-2. Honestly, I'm not sure where I'm at on any of that. Sometimes I think it's overcomplicating things. And sometimes I really just, as a coach, I just prefer it when we break lines and go and kind of score tries by playing off that. And I like to keep things as simple as they can be, but understand that we have to disguise some things as well. I think you can now appreciate a little bit why the focus for our technical development is the breakdown, because the way we operate the breakdown in defense will determine how well we can get on top of our opponent. And in securing our own possession, the speed of play is going to be absolutely key for us going forward if we're going to have our props and locks really making the hard yards like was described earlier. So I know this indoors is going to kill me because I want to be out on the field with you, but this is a good way to prepare for those things. Skippers, I'll hand it over to you.
Does anybody have any final questions, though? Comments, concerns? That's they want to share.
That video was really funny. Really like him.
He talks really fast.
The words went really fast. I'm gonna have to read them all after the.
I like the Mario in the 242 video.
Mario the Eclipse.
If you click the little gear symbol, you can have it play at like half speed or something if you need it to slow down.
Wow. Hopping in all the way from, where are you again, Nick? Switzerland?
No, I was in the Netherlands, but I'm home now for coronavirus.
Did they make you come home?
Yeah, so everything's online now.
Oh, okay. Well, at least you're back before things got bad.
Yeah.
As far as front row players, that was the focus of tonight's sessions, as far as like, skill specific stuff. If you are in one of those positions, think about what is expected of you as far from what JCL laid out in those slides and what you could do to prepare physically. So try to focus your training on preparing yourself to perform at that level based on those position specific expectations. And if you have questions, please reach out.
Did those videos, those got out, right?
What videos?
Great,
I
they
don't
didn't get
think-
out.
Wait, what are you talking
We'll
about?
make sure. We recorded videos of workouts.
the video.
I did not receive.
What?
Send them.
Cool. That's good that I asked then.
We'll work on getting those.
Yeah, I
The
didn't
workout.
I didn't realize until JCL said it that he thought they went out.
Yeah. The workouts are specific to front row, which is going to be really great for you to do what Esther just said. If you're front row, there's also one for centers that was recorded, so that'll be exciting. When those do get released, please ask questions if you have them. Some of them might be difficult to actually do completely based off all of our restrictions on gym equipment now, maybe, depending on what you have at home. So feel free to ask for adjustments or use your brain to think about how you can adjust it. But yeah, those will be really cool. Otherwise, everyone just make sure you kind of take care of yourselves and, try to work out at least 5 or 6 days a week since, what else are you doing? So.
Watching Survivor.
We're washing our hands.
Check in on your friends.
JCL, I put the video in the chat.
Can we put the videos? Can we send those links through email too?
Yeah.
How
So
accessible? Yeah.
Yeah.
For the work.
That.
What?
Is no one?
what do you think of the maps?
Ooh, look at this video. Oh.
So they're posted to the club website, I think. And
North Shore.
yeah, sorry, North Shore. Um,
Okay, cool. I'll take it out. Thank you.
Oh.
I love this. This is amazing.
Wow. Look at that.
Oh, I think I saw the beginning of the center one. Was this the one that says centers and wings can try?
yeah, yeah, that's right.
What does that say? 400 max?
And no, I think you have to go to their.
And forward,
You're really
forward,
quick,
look at the prop one. This is gonna be a little bit different.
Coming underneath the armpit. There we go. And from there, bicep curls.
But they updated their
Okay.
website. It's much better now.
Look
at her.
Okay, let me go. Bring it up, and change speed.
Oh, that's fish.
Now,
Now I can watch.
yeah. So,
You're not
you're
muted.
gonna walk around. You want to go from here.
What are you laughing about?
to that. Christian? Not here. Okay. As you're enjoying that, I'm going to sign off. Thanks for coming tonight. It's great to be part of this, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Skips, I'll send out the presentation and the notes. And if anybody's got any feedback, please send it to the captains, and they'll pass it on to me. Let me know what I can do better or differently for the next one. Thanks a lot. Have a great weekend. Look after yourselves.
Thanks, Coach.
You too.
Yeah, we'll do.
Weekend,
So everyone else, I have an announcement. Wait, from fundraising, I have an announcement real quick. Everyone else. So I